The streets of South Philadelphia were quiet the night Angelo Bruno died. It was March 21, 1980, the kind of cold spring evening when the city seemed to hold its breath. Neon lights flickered across Broad Street. Bars closed their doors. Taxi engines idled at the curb. Inside a parked Lincoln Continental, one of the most powerful mafia bosses in America sat silently in the passenger seat. Moments later, a shotgun blast shattered the calm. The windshield exploded into glass and blood. Within seconds, Angelo Bruno, the man known across the underworld as the Gentle Don, was dead. The newspapers the next morning would describe the scene in brutal simplicity. An elderly crime boss executed in his own car, just blocks from his home. But the reality behind that killing ran deeper than any headline suggested. Because the truth about Angelo Bruno's death, and the violent power struggle that led to it, was far darker than anything Hollywood would later portray. The film never showed the paranoia, the betrayal, or the quiet empire that Bruno had built over 2 decades, before it collapsed in a single gunshot. To understand what happened that night in 1980, investigators later concluded, you had to go back to the beginning. Long before Angelo Bruno became the most respected mafia boss in Philadelphia, he was simply Angelo Annaloro, a young immigrant born in Villalba, Sicily in 1910. Villalba was not an ordinary village. It was a stronghold of Sicilian mafia tradition, a place where criminal influence blended seamlessly with daily life. Power belonged to the men who could command loyalty, enforce silence, and survive long enough to rule. Like many Sicilian families in the early 20th century, the Annaloros eventually left for America. They arrived in Philadelphia when Angelo was still a child. South Philadelphia at that time was already developing its own version of the Sicilian underworld. Italian immigrant neighborhoods were crowded, poor, and tightly bound by family and tradition. In those streets, loyalty meant everything, and silence meant survival. Angelo grew up in this environment quietly. Unlike many future mafia figures, he was not known for street violence or loud displays of ambition. Those who knew him described something different: patience. Observers later noted that Bruno possessed a rare trait in organized crime. He preferred negotiation over bloodshed. According to multiple documented accounts, Bruno entered criminal life through loan sharking, numbers gambling, and small protection rackets during the 1930s. These were common stepping stones into organized crime, but Bruno approached them with unusual discipline. He kept a low profile. He avoided unnecessary attention. And most importantly, he formed relationships. By the 1940s, Bruno had developed connections with powerful mafia figures across the Northeast, including leaders in New York's 5 families. This network would become the foundation of his future power. But at that time, Philadelphia's criminal world was still ruled by a different man: Joseph Ida. Ida was the official boss of the Philadelphia crime family during the post-war years. Under his leadership, the organization maintained traditional mafia operations: gambling, loans, labor rackets. Angelo Bruno served quietly under Ida's structure. He was not yet the boss, but people noticed him. Investigators later discovered that Bruno had built a reputation inside the organization as a man who could resolve disputes without violence, a skill that made him valuable in a world where a single mistake could start a war. In mafia culture, restraint could be more powerful than brutality, and Bruno understood that instinctively. Then in 1959, everything changed. That year, federal investigations began closing in on Joseph Ida. Facing mounting legal pressure, Ida made a decision that altered the future of Philadelphia's underworld. He fled the United States. Ida returned permanently to Sicily. And suddenly, the Philadelphia crime family had no boss. According to multiple historical sources, the leadership transition that followed was unusually quiet by mafia standards. There were no public killings, no violent purges. Instead, the organization's senior figures agreed on a new leader: Angelo Bruno. By the early 1960s, Bruno officially controlled the Philadelphia Mafia, and he would rule it for nearly 20 years. During those 2 decades, Bruno cultivated an image that seemed almost contradictory to the violent world he commanded. He dressed conservatively. He spoke softly. He lived in a comfortable but modest home in South Philadelphia. Neighbors often described him as polite, respectful, even friendly. The media eventually gave him the nickname, the Gentle Don. But the nickname concealed a more complex reality. Bruno was not gentle. He was strategic. Investigators later determined that his empire generated enormous wealth through a wide network of illegal operations: sports betting, numbers rackets, loan sharking, cigarette smuggling, and labor union influence. Philadelphia under Bruno became one of the most stable mafia territories in the United States. While other cities experienced bloody internal wars, Bruno maintained order. Violence, he believed, attracted attention. Attention brought federal agents. And federal agents destroyed empires. So Bruno ran his organization with restraint, discipline, and careful alliances with the powerful mafia families in New York. But stability often breeds resentment. By the late 1970s, a new generation of mobsters inside the Philadelphia family had grown impatient with Bruno's leadership. These younger figures believed Bruno had become too cautious, too traditional, too unwilling to expand into emerging criminal markets, particularly drug trafficking, which was becoming one of the most profitable illegal industries in America. Bruno had forbidden members of his organization from dealing narcotics, not because he objected morally, but because drugs brought intense federal scrutiny. For the younger mobsters looking to make fortunes quickly, Bruno's policy felt like a prison. One of those men was Nicodemo Little Nicky Scarfo. Scarfo had spent years building his own power within the organization. He was ambitious, ruthless, and far more comfortable with violence than Bruno ever had been. Another rising figure was Philip Chicken Man Testa, one of Bruno's trusted lieutenants. Testa was outwardly loyal, but beneath the surface, alliances inside the family were shifting. According to investigators who later reconstructed the events, tensions inside the Philadelphia Mafia were quietly reaching a breaking point. Meetings became tense. Whispers circulated. Men began choosing sides. And Angelo Bruno, the calm ruler of a once stable empire, may have underestimated the depth of the conspiracy forming around him. Because in organized crime, patience is a virtue. But hesitation can be fatal. By early 1980, federal investigators would later conclude that powerful figures inside Bruno's own organization had already made a decision. The gentle Don had ruled long enough. And on the night of March 21, 1980, as Bruno sat in the passenger seat of his Lincoln Continental outside his home, someone was already waiting in the darkness with a shotgun. Someone was already waiting in the darkness with a shotgun. The Lincoln Continental rolled slowly to the curb outside Angelo Bruno's home at 10th Street and Snyder Avenue in South Philadelphia. It was just after 10:30 p.m. The street was quiet. Inside the car, Bruno sat in the passenger seat, relaxed, unaware that the final moments of his life had already begun. Behind the wheel was his longtime driver and bodyguard, John Stanfa, a Sicilian-born associate who had served Bruno faithfully for years. Stanfa had driven the boss home countless times before. There was nothing unusual about this night, but investigators would later determine that everything about this moment had been carefully arranged. Across the street, in the shadows, a gunman stepped forward. The weapon was not subtle. It was a 12-gauge shotgun, the kind designed to destroy at close range. The blast came without warning. One thunderous explosion shattered the quiet neighborhood. The shotgun blast tore through the passenger side window, sending a storm of glass and metal fragments into Bruno's face and chest. The force of the shot destroyed his skull instantly. Blood sprayed across the dashboard. Stanfa slammed his foot on the accelerator, panicked, but the damage had already been done. Angelo Bruno was dead. The Lincoln rolled forward a few feet before stopping awkwardly against the curb. Within seconds, the gunman disappeared into the darkness. Neighbors emerged cautiously from their homes. Some had heard the blast. Others saw the shattered car and the slumped figure inside. Police and emergency crews arrived quickly. But there was no saving the man once known as the most stable mafia boss in America. According to investigators who later studied the crime scene, the killing was professional, deliberate, and symbolic. Bruno had been executed directly outside his own home. A message had been sent. The gentle Don was gone. But the truth about who ordered the assassination, and why, was far more complex than the simple image of a shotgun blast on a quiet street. Because Angelo Bruno had not been killed by an outside enemy. He had been betrayed from within. In the days that followed the murder, law enforcement immediately suspected that Bruno's death was the result of an internal mafia power struggle. There were no signs of robbery. No personal dispute. This was an organized hit. And within organized crime, killings of this scale required permission. According to multiple documented accounts, the decision to remove Bruno had been building for months inside the Philadelphia crime family. The central figure behind that conspiracy was widely believed to be Antonio "Tony Bananas" Caponegro. Caponegro was not a minor soldier. He was one of Bruno's highest-ranking lieutenants, the capo who controlled the powerful Newark faction of the Philadelphia crime family. His crew generated enormous profits through gambling and racketeering operations across New Jersey. On the surface, Caponegro appeared loyal to Bruno, but behind closed doors, resentment had been growing. Like many younger mafia leaders in the late 1970s, Caponegro believed Bruno was blocking the future of the organization. The drug trade was exploding across the United States, creating fortunes for crime families willing to take the risk. Bruno refused to allow it. To Caponegro and others, this restraint looked like weakness. Investigators later discovered that Caponegro had begun secretly discussing Bruno's removal with powerful mafia figures in New York. In mafia tradition, killing a boss required approval from the Commission, the governing council of the American Mafia. Without permission, such an act would be considered a betrayal punishable by death. Caponegro believed he had that permission. According to federal intelligence gathered years later, Caponegro had met with Paul Castellano, the powerful boss of New York's Gambino crime family. What exactly was said during that meeting remains unclear. But Caponegro emerged convinced that Castellano supported the assassination of Angelo Bruno. Whether that belief was accurate, or a catastrophic misunderstanding, would later become one of the most deadly miscalculations in mafia history. With that supposed approval, Caponegro began assembling the plan. The hit would be carried out quickly, publicly, and decisively. Investigators later concluded that the shooter was likely a professional gunman connected to Caponegro's Newark crew. Bruno's daily routine made the operation simple. Every evening the boss returned home the same way. The same car, the same driver, the same street. Predictability in organized crime could become a fatal weakness. On March 21st, the plan moved forward. Bruno was lured into a routine drive home after dinner. Caponegro himself was nowhere near the scene. That was intentional. A boss's killer rarely appeared at the crime. Instead, the shotgun blast ended 2 decades of Bruno's rule in an instant. But in the mafia world, removing a boss did not simply create power. It created chaos. The morning after the murder, leaders across the American Mafia began asking the same question. Who authorized this? The Philadelphia crime family had always operated under the protection of the Commission. Killing its boss without permission would not just be a crime. It would be a declaration of war. Inside Philadelphia, uncertainty spread rapidly. Some members believed Caponegro had approval from New York. Others suspected he had acted on his own ambition. The man positioned to take over leadership in the immediate aftermath was Philip "Chicken Man" Testa, Bruno's longtime underboss and one of his most trusted associates. Testa was respected within the organization and had maintained close ties with Bruno for years. If the transition happened peacefully, Testa would likely become the new boss. But peace was not guaranteed. Nicodemo "Little Nicky" Scarfo, another rising figure within the family, was watching carefully. Scarfo had spent years building alliances and waiting for an opportunity to climb the hierarchy. Bruno's death had created that opportunity. Yet before anyone in Philadelphia could consolidate power, something unexpected happened. Within days of the assassination, Caponegro traveled to New York. According to later reports from informants and investigators, he believed he was about to receive official recognition for removing Bruno. Instead, he walked into a meeting that would seal his fate. Because the Commission had never approved the murder. The truth was devastating. Angelo Bruno had been one of the most respected bosses in the American Mafia. His calm leadership and loyalty to the Commission had earned him powerful allies in New York. And when news of his assassination reached those leaders, their reaction was immediate. Fury. According to multiple documented accounts, the Commission ruled that Tony Caponegro had committed one of the most serious violations in mafia law. He had murdered a boss without authorization. The punishment for that crime was absolute. But Caponegro did not yet know that judgment had already been passed. In New York, he walked into the meeting expecting congratulations. Instead, the men waiting for him had already decided how he would die. And the consequences of Angelo Bruno's murder were only beginning to unfold. In the days following the assassination, Tony Caponegro traveled to New York believing he had secured the most powerful victory of his life. He expected recognition, promotion, perhaps even control of the Philadelphia crime family. Instead, he had unknowingly walked into a death sentence. According to multiple documented accounts, the leaders of the American Mafia Commission were furious. Angelo Bruno had not been an unstable or reckless boss. Quite the opposite. For nearly 2 decades, Bruno had maintained peace. He avoided unnecessary violence. He respected the authority of the Commission. Within organized crime, Those qualities were valued more than ambition. Killing such a man without authorization was not simply disobedience. It was a direct challenge to the structure of the mafia itself. Investigators later discovered that Caponigro had gravely misunderstood his earlier meeting with Gambino boss Paul Castellano. Caponigro believed Castellano had approved the assassination. But according to intelligence gathered by federal agents and later confirmed by informants, Castellano had never given that permission. Some investigators believe Castellano may have listened to Caponigro's frustrations without committing to anything. Others suspect Caponigro simply heard what he wanted to hear. In the mafia world, assumptions could be fatal. By the time Caponigro arrived in New York to collect what he believed was his reward, the commission had already decided his fate. He was summoned to a meeting. But it was not a negotiation. It was an execution. According to law enforcement reports and later testimony from cooperating witnesses, Caponigro entered the meeting unaware that several high-ranking mafia figures had already agreed on the punishment. He would die for the unauthorized murder of Angelo Bruno. The execution was swift. Caponigro and one of his closest associates, Alfred Salerno, were taken to a house in the Bronx. Inside that house, the two men were killed. But the violence did not end there. The bodies were transported back to New York streets and abandoned in a car trunk, a display meant to send a message across the entire mafia network. When police discovered the bodies days later, the brutality of the punishment was unmistakable. Caponigro had been beaten severely before his death. His body showed signs of torture. But the most chilling detail lay in his pockets. Investigators found hundreds of dollars in cash stuffed into his underwear and mouth. Within mafia symbolism, this gesture carried a clear meaning. It was the punishment for greed. The message was simple. Caponigro had killed his boss in pursuit of money and power, and the commission had destroyed him for it. But while Caponigro's execution satisfied the commission's sense of order, it did not restore stability to Philadelphia. Angelo Bruno was still dead, and his absence created a dangerous vacuum. In the immediate aftermath, leadership of the Philadelphia crime family passed to Philip "Chicken Man" Testa. Testa had been Bruno's longtime underboss and was widely viewed as the natural successor. For a brief moment, it appeared that the organization might return to the calm structure Bruno had maintained for years. But investigators later concluded that the stability Bruno created had already been shattered beyond repair. The men who had grown impatient under his rule were still there. Their ambitions had not disappeared. They had only grown stronger. One of the most ambitious among them was Nicodemo "Little Nicky" Scarfo. Scarfo had spent years observing the internal politics of the Philadelphia Mafia. He understood its weaknesses. More importantly, he understood that Bruno's death had changed the rules. Violence had returned to the organization, and Scarfo was comfortable with violence. Under Testa's leadership, tensions inside the family continued to rise. Different factions competed for influence, territory, and control of the increasingly profitable criminal markets Bruno had once restricted. According to investigators who later studied the organization, the peace Bruno had maintained depended heavily on his personal authority. Without him, the balance collapsed. Then, less than 1 year after Angelo Bruno's assassination, the violence escalated again. On March 15, 1981, a bomb exploded beneath the porch of Philip Testa's home in South Philadelphia. The explosion ripped through the house with devastating force. Testa was killed instantly. The blast shattered windows across the neighborhood and announced something unmistakable to the underworld. The Philadelphia Mafia had entered a new era. The quiet discipline of Angelo Bruno was gone. What replaced it was instability, paranoia, and bloodshed. In the years that followed, Nicodemo Scarfo would eventually rise to become the boss of the Philadelphia crime family. His rule was dramatically different from Bruno's. Where Bruno preferred negotiation, Scarfo embraced intimidation. Where Bruno avoided unnecessary killings, Scarfo used violence as a constant tool of control. Investigators later described Scarfo's reign as one of the most brutal periods in Philadelphia Mafia history. Murders increased. Internal executions became common. Fear replaced loyalty. And federal law enforcement, which Bruno had carefully avoided provoking, now focused intense attention on the organization. Wiretaps, informants, undercover operations. By the mid-1980s, the same violence that had helped Scarfo seize power began destroying the empire from within. Former allies turned witnesses. Secret recordings exposed the inner workings of the crime family. In 1988, Scarfo and numerous members of his organization were convicted in major federal racketeering trials. The once powerful Philadelphia Mafia was shattered. Investigators later reflected on the moment Angelo Bruno was killed as the turning point. His murder had removed the one figure capable of maintaining long-term stability inside the organization. What followed was not a stronger empire. It was collapse. The film portrayals of Angelo Bruno's death often reduced the story to a simple mob assassination, a single shotgun blast in a parked car. But the truth was far more consequential. Bruno's murder did not just eliminate a mafia boss. It triggered a chain reaction, a conspiracy fueled by ambition, a brutal punishment from the Mafia Commission, a bombing that killed his successor, and a violent era that ultimately drew the full attention of federal investigators. In the end, the empire Bruno had spent decades building did not survive him. It tore itself apart. And the quiet man once called the Gentle Don became one of the last leaders of a mafia generation that believed organized crime could remain controlled, disciplined, and invisible. After his death, that illusion vanished. What remained was chaos, and the echo of a single shotgun blast on a quiet South Philadelphia street.